Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez just made the most catastrophic misstep of her political career on live television, looking Ted Cruz dead in the eye and calling him out of touch without knowing what was in his folder. 5 receipts. Her own FEC filings, her own ethics committee violations, her own campaign staff's emails including 5 words her treasurer never meant anyone to see, and a letter from a $25 donor in the Bronx that made the entire room go dead silent. By the time Cruz was done, the woman who built her entire career on tax the rich couldn't explain $53,000 in luxury hotels paid for by home health aides making $17.50 an hour. What happened next destroyed everything she spent 6 years building. Before we get into what happened, if you believe politicians should spend your money honestly, hit subscribe. This story is just getting started. AOC went first, as she always went first. 6 years in Congress had taught her that the person who sets the frame wins the argument, and framing was what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did better than anyone in American politics. She leaned into the microphone. The hearing room, the Kennedy caucus room, the same marble and chandelier space where Watergate testimony had happened, where Iran-Contra confessions had been extracted, where every major congressional reckoning of the last 50 years had played out was full. Every gallery seat was taken, the press section was standing room only, and camera operators from 4 networks were adjusting their angles. And 6 feet across the table, Ted Cruz sat with a manila folder under his folded hands and an expression that AOC had never seen up close. It was the half-smile of a man who knows what's in the folder. She ignored the folder and went straight for him. Senator Cruz and I finally agree on one thing: the system is broken. But we disagree on who broke it, she started. Her voice sharpened, the practiced blade edge that her Instagram followers recognized as the beginning of a clapback. Senator Cruz has taken over $35 million from oil and gas companies over his career. He flew to Cancun while Texans froze to death. He voted against every single piece of legislation that would limit dark money in politics. And now he sits across from me, 6 feet away at the same table, and tells us the rules are sufficient. She turned to the cameras. The cameras were always the real audience. AOC understood this better than anyone in the building. The hearing was a joint House-Senate panel on campaign finance reform. Her idea, her issue, her platform. She had spent 6 years arguing that money was poisoning democracy. The rules are sufficient for you, Senator, because the system was designed to protect people like you, people who went to Princeton and Harvard, people whose entire careers have been funded by the corporations this system shields. Her voice softened, shifting into the register her followers knew as real talk. I grew up in a family that couldn't afford what Senator Cruz takes for granted. I worked as a bartender. I know what it's like to count tips at the end of a shift and wonder if it's enough for the subway ride home. I know what it's like to pour drinks for people who make more in an hour than you make in a week. She straightened up. So please, Senator, spare me the lecture about enforcement. Enforcement doesn't work when the enforcers are funded by the people breaking the rules. The room responded the way rooms respond to AOC. The left side applauded, the right side waited, and the cameras captured a woman who knew exactly how to fill a frame. Cruz sat across the table. His hands hadn't moved from the folder, and his expression hadn't changed. He looked to anyone watching like a man who had just been told the weather forecast for a city he didn't live in. Interested, polite, completely unbothered. The chairman nodded. Senator Cruz, your opening statement. Cruz leaned forward and adjusted his microphone. The small scrape of the microphone base on the table was the loudest sound in the room. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Congresswoman. That was very well delivered. The word delivered hung in the air. Not said, not argued, not testified. Delivered. The word you use for a performance. The word a debate coach uses when the form was good but the substance was missing. The Congresswoman said, I went to Princeton and Harvard. She's right, I did. My father washed dishes to send me there. He came from Cuba with $100 sewn into his underwear. He worked double shifts and triple shifts and slept 4 hours a night so his son could go to a school he'd never heard of. Every tuition check was written in dishwashing money. I've never forgotten that, and I never will. The Congresswoman says the system is broken and she wants to fix it. I agree the system has problems, but I don't think we need new rules. I think we need to enforce the rules we already have. He paused. And to demonstrate why, I'm going to do something unusual. Instead of debating theory, instead of arguing about dark money and corporate PACs and all the abstractions that make good speeches but don't change anything, I'm going to show this panel what it looks like when someone breaks the existing rules. He placed his hand on the manila folder. I'm going to show the panel some receipts. He looked at AOC. Your receipts, Congresswoman. Cruz opened the folder. The first document was several pages printed in color, with 3 columns of data visible from across the table. Congresswoman, I'm going to show you a receipt. He held up the document. This is your 2025 campaign disbursement filing. Public record, available to anyone who looks. But most people don't look past the totals. I did. My staff did. We broke it down line by line and matched each hotel stay with the hotel's published average nightly rate. He pointed to the 3 columns. Column A, your campaign's hotel disbursements for 2025. Column B, the average nightly rate at each hotel from their public booking sites. Column C, the average monthly rent in your district, the 14th Congressional District of New York, parts of the Bronx and Queens. $1,850 a month. He ran his finger down column A, Langham Huntington, Pasadena, $450 a night. Vidara Hotel and Spa, Las Vegas, $380 a night. Lansdowne Resort, Virginia, $325 a night. Arlo Williamsburg, Brooklyn, $275 a night. Hotel Palacio Provincial, San Juan, $4,000 for the stay, plus a separate line item of $10,743 in catering and meals. He looked up. In total, Congresswoman, you spent $53,000 on luxury and boutique hotels in 2025 using campaign funds donated by people in your district whose average monthly rent is $1,850. He set the document down. You spent more on hotels in 1 year than 3 of your constituents spend on rent in 1 year combined. AOC opened her mouth. The beginning of a response, the instinct to contextualize, to explain that campaign travel requires lodging, that these expenses are standard. Cruz didn't let her finish, but that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is the timing. He turned to a second page, a calendar overlay with hotel stay dates highlighted in yellow and public event schedules annotated in red. My staff cross-referenced your hotel check-in and check-out dates with publicly available campaign event schedules, your own website, your social media announcements, local media coverage. On 3 of the hotel stays, Langham Huntington in Pasadena, Vidara in Las Vegas, and Arlo Williamsburg in Brooklyn, there was no scheduled campaign event, no fundraiser, no town hall, no public appearance within 48 hours of your check-in or check-out. He looked at AOC. 3 hotel stays, no campaign purpose listed, no event within 2 days in either direction. Just a nice hotel on your donor's dime. He tapped one of the highlighted entries. I want to focus on the Arlo Williamsburg for a moment because this one is special. The Arlo Williamsburg is a boutique hotel in Brooklyn. It's in New York City. Congresswoman, your city. The city where you live. The city where your district is. You rented a hotel room at $275 a night with campaign funds in the city where you already have a home. He let that sit. There are people in your district who sleep 3 to a bedroom because they can't afford a 1-bedroom apartment, and you used campaign donations to rent a hotel room in the same city where you own a residence. I'm trying to think of a way to explain that to Elena Dominguez. I can't. He paused. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Not sarcastic, not prosecutorial, personal. My father came to this country from Cuba with $100 sewn into his underwear, literally in the fabric. He washed dishes in Austin, Texas for 50 cents an hour. He worked his way through school. He slept on the floor of a friend's apartment because he couldn't afford a bed, let alone a hotel. He never stayed in a hotel he couldn't pay for with his own money. Not once in 50 years. If I had told my father that one day a member of Congress would spend $53,000 of other people's money on luxury hotels, including a hotel room in the same city where she lives, while giving speeches about fighting the oligarchy, he would have looked at me and said, "Mijo, that is the oligarchy." AOC shifted in her chair. Her hand moved to her papers, the instinct of a woman looking for talking points that would address what was happening. Her chief of staff, seated in the row behind her, had already pulled out a phone and was typing with the focused urgency of someone drafting a damage control statement before the damage was finished. And the damage wasn't finished. Cruz continued, flipping to an annotated page. Your campaign paid for meals at a restaurant in Las Vegas, where the sushi tasting menu is $150 per person, at a seafood restaurant on the Strip where entrees exceed $100, and at a restaurant in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where the espresso martinis are $24. He closed the page. This was during your Fight the Oligarchy tour with Senator Sanders. The tour about how working people can't afford to live. He looked at her. You fought the oligarchy from a $4,000 hotel room, Congresswoman, with a $24 espresso martini in your hand. Cruz didn't wait for a response. He turned the page in the folder the way a lawyer turns exhibits in a deposition, methodically, without permission, as though the conversation were his to sequence, and AOC were a witness whose schedule he controlled. Receipt 2. He removed a single document, a photocopy of a government form with 2 fields highlighted in yellow. This is a Congressional spouse PIN application for your fiancé, Riley Roberts. PIN number 4471, issued March 3, 2021. I obtained it through a FOIA request to the architect of the Capitol. He held it up so the cameras could see the highlighted fields. The name field says Riley Roberts, spouse. That designation gave Mr. Roberts access to restricted areas of the Capitol complex. It allowed him to travel internationally on taxpayer-funded, sponsored trips reserved for members' spouses, and it qualified him for a free admission ticket to the 2021 Met Gala, valued at $35,000, under the gift exception that applies only to spouses. Cruz pointed to the second highlighted field. Below the name field is a checkbox. It reads, "Is spouse's financial information included in Member S annual disclosure?" The box is unchecked. He set the form on the table. Same form, same page. Spouse in the name field, not spouse in the disclosure field. He looked at AOC. In law school, Congresswoman, we call that consciousness of avoidance. It means you structured your paperwork to get the benefits of a designation while avoiding the obligations that come with it. Riley Roberts is your spouse when it gets him into the Met Gala. He's a stranger when it's time to show the receipts. AOC's jaw tightened. Senator, this is a personal attack on my family, and I, Congresswoman, I'm not attacking your family. I'm reading a form that you filled out. You checked spouse in one box and unchecked it in the next. I didn't do that. You did. He leaned back. What is Riley Roberts' net worth, Congresswoman? What stocks does he hold? What consulting contracts does he have? What companies does he have interest in companies that might have business before the committees you sit on? We don't know. The Ethics Committee doesn't know. Your constituents don't know. Because you classified him as not spouse on every financial disclosure form for 4 consecutive years, while simultaneously using his spouse designation to obtain $35,000 in free gifts and restricted capital access. Cruz paused. You just gave this panel a speech about getting money out of politics, about transparency, about accountability, and your fiancé's finances, a man who walks the halls of Congress with a spouse pin, who has traveled internationally on the taxpayer's tab, who received a $35,000 gift under your name, are completely invisible to the American public. Congresswoman, that S not transparency. That's a magic trick. He reached into the folder and pulled out a second document, a spreadsheet. And it gets worse. My staff compiled a list of every benefit Riley Roberts has received under his spouse classification since 2021. He read from the spreadsheet. 1 Congressional spouse PIN, unrestricted capital access, 3 sponsored international trips classified as member and spouse travel London 2022, Tokyo 2023, Munich 2025, Total taxpayer cost $47,000. One Met Gala admission, value $35,000, and daily access to the House members' dining room, the gym, and the cloakroom. He set the spreadsheet down. $82,000 in benefits, $0 in disclosed financial information. That's the deal. Riley Roberts got the benefits of being married to a member of Congress without any of the transparency that comes with it. Cruz leaned forward. The lean of a debater, not a senator. The lean of a man who spent 4 years on the Princeton debate team and had learned that the most devastating argument is the one that uses the opponent's own words. You stood in front of cameras at the Met Gala in a dress that said tax the rich. You've spent 6 years telling the American people that the wealthy hide their money from accountability, that the system protects people who use legal loopholes to avoid transparency. He pointed at the spouse PIN application. What is this, Congresswoman? If not a loophole, your fiancé gets an $82,000 ride, capital access, international travel, the Met Gala, and in return, the American people get zero information about his income, his investments, his clients, or his business interests. You are doing exactly what you accuse the wealthy of doing. The only difference is that you're redoing it on a government form instead of a tax return. AOC's jaw was tight. The muscles in her neck were visible, the tension of a woman holding back words she wanted to say. Senator, this is a personal attack on my family, and I won't, Congresswoman. I am reading a government form with your signature on it. If your signature on a public document is a personal attack, then perhaps you should be more careful about what you sign. Receipt 3. Cruz removed 2 documents from the folder. The first was a printout from a website. The second was a single page, an email printed with a header and body text visible. Your 2025 FEC filing shows 3 payments to Dr. Brian W. Boyle of Brookline, Massachusetts. March $11,550. May $2,800. October $4,375. Total $18,725. All 3 payments are listed as leadership training and consulting. He held up the first document, the website printout. This is Dr. Boyle's professional website. He is a board-certified psychiatrist. He specializes in, and I am reading from his site, interventional psychiatry, treatment-resistant depression, and ketamine-assisted therapy. He is described in the New York Post as a leading authority on ketamine. Cruz looked at the website, looked at AOC, looked at the website again. Nowhere on this website, not on the About page, not on the Services page, not on the Contact page, does Dr. Boyle advertise leadership training or consulting or anything related to political campaigns. He set the website printout down and picked up the second document, the email. But that's the website. This is the email. The hearing room went quiet, not the attentive quiet of people listening, the anticipatory quiet of people who can feel a detonation approaching. This is an internal email from your campaign. It was produced as part of the FEC complaint discovery process. It is dated February 2025, 1 month before the first payment to Dr. Boyle. It is between your campaign treasurer and your chief of staff. Cruz read, "We need to find a billing code for the Boyle sessions. Campaign funds can cover personal medical. Can we classify as consulting?" He set the email on the table. Can we classify as consulting? 5 words. Your campaign treasurer, the person responsible for the legal accuracy of your federal filings, asked your chief of staff whether a psychiatrist's bills could be reclassified as consulting because, and I quote, campaign funds can cover personal medical. They knew. Congresswoman, your own staff knew that this was a personal medical expense. They knew it couldn't legally be paid with campaign funds. And they didn't stop the payment. They didn't tell you to pay out of pocket. They asked how to hide it. Can we classify as consulting? That's not an accounting question. That's a cover-up question. AOC's face had changed. The performative confidence, The Instagram-ready composure that had carried her through 6 years of Republican attacks and cable news confrontations was gone. In its place was something raw, the expression of a person hearing their own words read back to them in a room they cannot control. She turned to her chief of staff seated behind her. The turn was sharp, not the casual lean of a woman conferring with an aide, but the urgent pivot of someone who needs to know how a private email ended up on a table in the United States Senate. The chief of staff was looking at her phone. She did not look up. "Congresswoman," Cruz said, "I want to be clear about something. I don't care whether you see a psychiatrist. That is your right. That is your private business. Mental health is serious, and I would never criticize anyone for seeking treatment." His voice hardened. "What I care about is that you took $18,725 from campaign donors, people who gave you $5, $10, $25 because they believed in your message, and you used their money for personal medical expenses and then lied about it on a federal filing. Your staff knew it was personal. They asked how to reclassify it, and then they reclassified it. That's not campaign finance reform, Congresswoman. That's campaign finance fraud." The word fraud landed differently than the other words. Hypocrisy is a political word. Politicians survive hypocrisy every day. Inconsistency is a bureaucratic word. It can be explained, contextualized, spun. But fraud is a legal word. It means a crime. And Cruz, the former Solicitor General of Texas, the man who had argued 9 cases before the Supreme Court, the man who had spent his career choosing legal words with the precision of a surgeon choosing instruments, had chosen it deliberately. AOC's hands moved to the table. Both hands, palms down, fingers spread. The posture of someone who is physically bracing against something. Not gripping, pressing. The way you press against a surface when the room is moving, and you need something solid. Her chief of staff leaned forward from the row behind and placed a note on the table beside AOC's elbow. AOC did not look at it. She was staring at the campaign email still face up on the table between them. The 5 words visible from every camera angle in the room can we classify as consulting. Her own treasurer's words, in her own campaign's email system, on a table in the United States Senate. Cruz let the silence do its work. He understood from Princeton debate, from Harvard moot court, from 1,000 cross-examinations, that the most powerful rhetorical device is not a question or an answer. It is the pause after a word that cannot be taken back. He let frauds sit in the hearing room the way a stone sits at the bottom of a pond, settled, permanent, undisturbed by anything that moves above it. Then he turned the page. Receipt 4. Cruz reached into the folder and pulled out a thick document. The House Ethics Committee report from July 2025. 26 pages, with multiple sticky note tabs protruding from the edges. He opened it to a tabbed page. Most people read the headline on this report: Ethics Committee finds AOC violated House rules regarding Met Gala attendance, ordered to pay $3,000. That's the headline. Most reporters stopped there. He held up the report. I didn't stop there. The footnotes are where the real story lives. He turned to a tabbed section. Footnote 117, page 19. The committee's report states, no one appeared to be thinking about the cost of anything despite the fact that they were told to keep the costs down by the Congresswoman's staff because the Congresswoman had and has limited financial means. Cruz looked up. Limited financial means. That's how your own team described your financial situation to the Ethics Committee. But your campaign spent $53,000 on luxury hotels in the same year. Limited means for personal expenses, unlimited means for campaign-funded hotels. He turned to another tab. The report documents a text message from your former campaign staffer to the designer who made the dress. The text reads, "There is no restriction on Riley, by the way," meaning your fiancé could accept gifts without limitation. Your staff gave the green light for Riley Roberts to accept gifts from a designer who was being paid, or not paid as it turned out, to dress you for a $35,000 a ticket party. Cruz turned another page. The Hairstylist's Agency. They invoiced your campaign for services rendered at the Met Gala. The invoice was sent in September 2021. It went unpaid. October unpaid. November unpaid. December unpaid. January 2022 unpaid. Your campaign staffer received multiple follow-up emails. None were answered. On February 23, 2022, 5 months after the event, the agency notified your staff that they would file a formal ethics complaint if payment was not received by end of business the following day. February 24th, 1 day later, after 5 months of silence, the invoice was paid. 5 months, Congresswoman. A small business, a hairstylist, a working person. Exactly the kind of person you tell the cameras you fight for every day had to chase your campaign for 5 months and then threaten you with an ethics complaint to get paid for work they damn already done on your hair, for your party, at your event. Cruz paused. Let it land. You know who else doesn't get paid on time, Congresswoman? The people in your district, the Elena Dominguezes. The women who do other people's hair for a living. Except they don't have the option of threatening a member of Congress with an ethics complaint. They just don't get paid. Cruz reached into the folder one final time for this section. A single sheet. And one more receipt. A car service invoice for September 13, 2021, the night of the Met Gala. The invoice was billed to Condé Nast, owned by Advance Publications, a privately held company with estimated revenues of $2.5 billion. He set the invoice on the table. A billion-dollar corporation paid for your car to drive you to a $35,000 a ticket party where you wore a custom designer gown that said "Tax the Rich." And then you didn't pay the people who did your hair for 5 months until they threatened to report you. Cruz shook his head. That dress didn't say "Tax the Rich," Congresswoman. It said "Tax everyone except me." Cruz closed the Ethics Committee report. He set it aside. He placed the FEC filing aside. He placed the spouse PIN application aside. He placed the campaign email aside. He cleared the table in front of him until there was nothing left except one piece of paper, a handwritten letter on lined notebook paper, the kind you buy in a 3-pack at the dollar store. Last receipt, Congresswoman. His voice was different now. The sarcasm was gone. The forensic precision was gone. What remained was something quieter. The voice of a man who had grown up watching his father count dishwashing money and who understood in a way that no policy debate could capture what it meant to earn $1 and trust someone else with it. This isn't from the FEC. It isn't from the Ethics Committee. It's a letter I received 3 weeks ago from a woman named Elena Dominguez. He held up the letter. Elena lives at 1847 Grand Concourse, Apartment 4B. That's in your district, Congresswoman. The Bronx. She's a home health aide. She makes $17.50 an hour. She goes to people's homes and helps them bathe, helps them eat, helps them get out of bed. She changes sheets. She cleans wounds. She lifts people who can lift themselves. In 2024, Elena donated $25 to your campaign. That was the most she could afford. $25 is roughly 2 hours of her work. 2 hours of wiping someone's back and changing their sheets converted into a political contribution. He read from the letter, "Dear Senator Cruz, I don't usually write to politicians. I'm writing because I saw on the news that Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez spent $53,000 on hotels using campaign money. I donated $25 to her campaign. That's 2 hours of my work. I donated because she said she was a bartender like me, someone who knows what it's like. Now I find out she used my $25, and everyone else says $25 for a $450 a night hotel in Pasadena. I don't know what Pasadena is, but I know what $450 is. That's more than my grocery bill for a month." Cruz set the letter on the table gently. "The way you set down something that matters. Elena Dominguez works 40 hours a week, taking care of other people's parents and grandparents. She gets up at 5:30 inches the morning. She drives a Honda Civic with 187,000 miles on it. She parks in the lot behind the medical supply building on Grand Concourse between clients and eats lunch in her car because there's no break room when your office is other people's apartments. She donated $25 to your campaign because she believed you understood her life. She believed you when you said you were a bartender, that you knew what it was like to count tips, that you were fighting for people like her. She gave you 2 hours of her labor, 2 hours of lifting, an 3-year-old woman out of a shower chair, 2 hours of changing sheets and cleaning wounds and doing the work that nobody thanks you for, and she converted those 2 hours into a political contribution because she trusted you, and you used her donation, and thousands like it, for $450 a night hotels in cities Elena has never visited. For $150, sushi tasting menus at restaurants Elena will never enter. For $24, espresso martinis at bars where Elena's 2 hours of work wouldn't cover a single round. For $18,725 in personal medical expenses, reclassified as consulting by a staff that knew it was illegal and asked in writing how to hide it. Cruz's voice dropped. The sarcasm was gone. The wit was gone. What was left was the voice of a man whose father had counted dishwashing money at a kitchen table, and who understood, in the bone, in the muscle, in the place where understanding lives when it comes from experience rather than education, what it meant when someone trusted you with their money and you spent it on yourself. My father washed dishes for 50 cents an hour. He never asked anyone to pay for his hotel. He never called himself a revolutionary while drinking $24 cocktails. He never flew to Puerto Rico on someone else's dime and ordered espresso martinis while giving speeches about the working class. He just worked. And when he came home at night, late, always late, smelling like grease and industrial soap, he counted his money, earned with his hands, not donated by someone who trusted him, and he figured out how to make it last. You told this panel you want to get money out of politics, Congresswoman. I agree. Let's start with the $53,000 of other people's money you spent on hotels. Let's start with the $18,725 you spent on a psychiatrist and called consulting. Let's start with the $35,000 free ticket you took for a fiancé whose finances you refused to disclose. He looked at her. You don't want money out of politics, Congresswoman. You want other people's money out of politics. Yours like to keep. AOC's eyes were glassy. Not crying, not yet, but close enough that the cameras would catch the sheen. And in the age of screenshots and clip culture, the sheen was the story. Her lips were pressed together, the muscular effort of a woman holding her mouth closed because the alternative was saying something she couldn't take back, or making a sound she couldn't control. Her hands were flat on the table, fingers spread, pressing down, not resting, pressing, the way a person presses against a surface when the room is moving and they need something solid. She had been in this position before, attacked on camera, ambushed with talking points, confronted with accusations that were designed to make her look bad. She had survived all of it. She had survived it because she was fast. Faster than any politician of her generation at the counterpunch, the clapback, the Instagram story that turned an attack into a fundraising opportunity. But speed requires a target, and Cruz had not given her one. He hadn't called her names, he hadn't attacked her ideology, he hadn't questioned her intelligence or her gender or her background. The attacks she was built to survive. He had read receipts, her receipts, and there is no clapback for a receipt. There is no Instagram story that makes $53,000 in luxury hotels disappear. There is no fundraising email that explains, can we classify as consulting? Her chief of staff had stopped looking at her phone. She was watching AOC with the expression of someone standing on a pier watching a boat take on water, unable to do anything except wait for the moment it goes under. Cruz sat in silence for a moment. The hearing room was so quiet that the hum of the ventilation system was audible. The soft, mechanical breath of a building that had heard Watergate testimony and Iran-Contra confessions, and now, in the same marble room, was hearing the sound of a career narrative collapsing under the weight of its own receipts. Congresswoman, Cruz said, you built your career on a story. The bartender who became a congresswoman. The girl from the Bronx who fights for working people. It's a great story. I genuinely mean that. The American dream says anyone can make it, and you made it. But stories have to be true, and yours stopped being true the moment you started spending campaign donations on luxury hotels while your donors count grocery money. The moment you filed your fiancé as a spouse to get free tickets, and as a stranger to hide his money. The moment you paid a psychiatrist $18,725 and your own staff asked in writing how to classify it as consulting on a federal form. He paused. You were a bartender, Congresswoman. You know what a tip jar is? AOC looked up. The mention of the tip jar, the specific, concrete detail from the life she had left behind, registered in a way that the financial data had not. Her eyes focused on Cruz for the first time since the receipts had begun. People put money in the tip jar because they trust the person behind the bar. They believe they're going to get honest service for honest pay. They don't put money in the tip jar so the bartender can go stay at a $450 hotel in Pasadena. They put money in because they trust you. Your donors, Elena Dominguez and the thousands of people like her, put money in your tip jar. $5, $10, $25, 2 hours of Elena's life, and you spent it on yourself. Cruz leaned forward. In any bar in America, Congresswoman, that gets you fired. The hearing room was silent. Not the performative silence of political theater, the genuine silence of a room full of people who have just heard something they cannot unhear. This hearing is about campaign finance reform. You want new rules? I want enforcement of the rules we have. But on one thing we can agree. The rules, old or new, mean nothing if the people who write them, one, follow them. You don't follow them, Congresswoman. The Ethics Committee says you don't follow them. The FEC complaint says you don't follow them. Your own campaign emails, your own treasurer's words say you don't follow them. He gathered the receipts into a neat stack, placed them back in the folder, closed the folder, and set it on the table. So before we reform the system, Congresswoman, maybe you should reform yourself. The clip of Cruz reading the campaign email, "Can we classify as consulting?" was posted at 1:24 p.m. Eastern, bit 0 p.m. It had been viewed 15 million times. By midnight, it was the most shared political clip of the week. The 5 words were printed on merchandise by morning. In any bar in America, "That Gets You Fired" trended #1 within 30 minutes and held the position for 19 hours. AOC went live on Instagram at 8:00 p.m. The stream lasted 45 minutes. She cried. She called the hearing a coordinated right-wing attack designed to silence progressive women who threatened the establishment. She said the receipts were taken out of context. She said the hotel expenses were standard campaign travel. She said the psychiatrist payments were legitimate consulting services. She did not address the campaign email. She did not explain can we classify as consulting. She did not mention Elena Dominguez. She did not explain the 3 hotel stays with no campaign events within 48 hours. She did not address Riley Roberts' undisclosed finances. The comment section told the rest of the story. For every supportive message, "Stay strong, Queen," they re-scared of you 3 others, asked the same questions. What about the email? Where did Elena's $25 go? Address the hotels. Why won't you answer about Riley's finances? Her own base was splitting, not along ideological lines, but along the simplest possible line. The line between people who believed the explanation and people who had read the receipts. Within 48 hours, the Federal Election Commission upgraded the NLPC complaint from preliminary review to formal investigation. The commission cited the campaign email, "Can we classify as consulting?" as evidence of intent to misreport disbursements. An FEC commissioner issued a rare public statement. The email, if authenticated, suggests the misclassification was not inadvertent. The word inadvertent was doing the work of 1,000 legal briefs, because if the misclassification was not inadvertent, it was deliberate, and deliberate misreporting of campaign disbursements is a federal crime. The Office of Congressional Conduct opened a separate probe into Riley Roberts' spouse, non-spouse dual classification, specifically the spouse PIN issuance, the undisclosed financial holdings, and whether the inconsistency constituted a willful circumvention of House disclosure rules. 3 campaign donors, including Elena Dominguez, filed a class action complaint with the FEC, alleging that campaign funds had been used for personal expenses. The complaint cited Cruz's side-by-side analysis, the 3 hotel stays with no campaign events, and the campaign email. AOC's campaign treasurer resigned. No public statement. The resignation letter was leaked to Politico within hours. I can no longer serve in a capacity where my prior communications may be subject to further legal scrutiny. The word prior confirmed what everyone suspected. There were more emails. By the end of the first week, the House Ethics Committee announced it was reopening the Met Gala case. Not the $3,000 already settled, but the Condé Nast car service payment and additional unreported gifts that Cruz had identified during the hearing. Investigative reporters digging into Riley Roberts' background after the spouse PIN revelation discovered that he held undisclosed consulting contracts with 2 technology companies that had active lobbying interests before committees AOC served on. Total unreported income over 3 years, an estimated $340,000. The contracts had never been disclosed because Roberts was classified as not spouse on financial forms. AOC canceled the remaining dates of the Fight the Oligarchy tour. Her campaign cited scheduling adjustments. Axios reported the real reason every remaining venue is in a hotel that will become the next receipt. A primary challenger announced in NY14, Carmen Reyes, a Bronx-born community health organizer who still lived in the district, who had never stayed in a luxury hotel, who made $52,000 a year. Her announcement video was 30 seconds long. I live here, I work here, and I can tell you where every dollar goes. She raised $180,000 in her first 72 hours, mostly from small donors in AOC's district. By the end of the second week, the DOJ's Public Integrity Section had opened a preliminary review of the psychiatrist payments. Elena Dominguez gave one interview to NY1, the local Bronx news channel. She was calm. She did not attack AOC. She said, "I'm not political. I just wanted to know where my $25 went." Nobody answered me. The senator from Texas answered me. The clip was viewed 8 million times. She became the face of small donor betrayal, not because she was angry, but because she was tired. AOC's approval rating in her own district dropped 11 points. For the first time since 2018, she was underwater among her own constituents. Among voters under 30, the demographic she had built her career on, approval dropped 8 points. Democratic leadership quietly removed AOC from the Financial Services Committee, the committee that oversees banking regulation and Wall Street accountability. No public announcement. The removal was noticed by roll call 2 days later. A senior Democratic aide told Politico, "You can sit on the committee that regulates financial transparency when your own finances aren't transparent." AOC posted on Instagram, "They repunishing me for fighting the system." The top comment with 47,000 likes said, "You are the system." Now, in a parking lot in the Bronx, the lot behind the medical supply building on Grand Concourse where the home health aides park between clients, Elena Dominguez sat in her 2009 Honda Civic and watched the hearing on her phone. She had 5 minutes. Mrs. Bautista was next to apartment 6C, 2 blocks east. The woman with the bad hip and the kind eyes who always said gracias, Mija, when Elena helped her out of the shower chair. 15 minutes in the car, phone propped against the steering wheel. The cracked screen showing a hearing room in Washington that looked like it cost more to build than every building on her block combined. She didn't know Cruz had read her letter until her daughter texted at 1:247 p.m., "Mommy, you're on TV." She watched the clip. She heard her own words, her handwriting, her sentences, her $25 read aloud by a senator from Texas she had never met and would probably never meet. She saw AOC's face, the glassy eyes, the pressed lips, the hands flat on the table. Elena felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not vindication. Just the tiredness of a woman who works 40 hours a week at $17.50 an hour, who gets up at 5:30 every morning, who drives a car with 187,000 miles on it, who donated $25 to someone she thought understood what $25 meant. She opened her bank app. 347美元12美分. She looked at the number the way she looked at it every day. Not with anxiety, not with despair, but with the flat attention of a person who has learned to know exactly where she stands at all times, because standing anywhere else is not an option. $25. Not a lot of money, but every dollar in that account was earned. Every dollar matched a shift. Every dollar was accounted for. She closed the app, put the phone in her bag, got out of the car, and walked 2 blocks east to Mrs. Bautista's building. Took the elevator to the 6th floor, knocked on the door. Hola, Doña Bautista. Hola, mija, come in. Elena helped her out of the chair, helped her into the bathroom, helped her into the shower, waited, helped her out, dried her back, helped her into clean clothes, made her tea, and sat with her for a moment. Gracias, mija, de nada. That was the job. No hotel, no martini, no leadership training, no espresso, anything. Just the work. The quiet, invisible $17.50 an hour work of keeping someone's grandmother alive and clean and dignified. Elena picked up her bag, drove to the next client, parked, and checked her phone. 3 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. Reporters, probably. She didn't call them back. She went to work. In a house in Houston. Not a large house. Not a small house. The kind of house a man buys when he has spent enough years washing dishes to understand exactly what a house costs. Rafael Cruz watched his son on television. The television was in the living room. The sound was up. Rafael didn't need subtitles. He had been watching American politics in English for 50 years, since the day he arrived in Austin with $100 sewn into his underwear and a vocabulary of maybe 300 words, most of them wrong. When Ted said, "My father washed dishes for 50 cents an hour," Rafael closed his eyes. He didn't close them because the memory was painful. He closed them because the memory was precise. He could feel the dishes, the ceramic plates, the stainless steel pots, the cast iron skillets that weighed more than his son had weighed at birth. He could feel the water. Too hot, always too hot, because the restaurant owner believed hot water cleaned faster, and Raphael's hands weren't worth adjusting the temperature. He could feel the grease, the particular grease of American restaurant kitchens, the mixture of beef fat and fryer oil that embedded itself under his fingernails and wouldn't come out no matter how much soap he used, the grease that his wife could smell on his hands when he came home at midnight and that she never complained about because she understood that the grease was the price and the price was worth paying. $100 sewn into his underwear. Not a metaphor, not a campaign line, not a story his son told at fundraisers to humanize himself. The actual American currency, a 50 and 2 20s and a 10, folded flat and stitched into the waistband of his underwear by his mother in Havana because she had heard that the Americans searched your luggage but not your clothes, and because $100 was everything she had saved in 2 years, and because her son was leaving and she wanted him to arrive with something. He arrived with something. He arrived with the money, and the underwear, and 300 words of English, and a willingness to wash dishes that didn't belong to him, so that one day the dishes and the house and the degree and the life would. His son was a senator. Princeton, Harvard Law, 9 arguments before the Supreme Court, chairman of the Commerce Committee. That was the story. Not the $100, not the dishes, not the grease. The senator. The boy who had stood in the kitchen of the Austin apartment where Raphael counted his dishwashing money and said, "Papi, I'm going to Princeton." And Raphael had said, "What is Princeton?" And Ted had said, "It's a school." And Raphael had said, "Is it a good school?" And Ted had said, "It's the best school." And Raphael had closed his eyes the same way he was closing them now, and had not cried, because men who wash dishes for 50 cents an hour do not cry in front of their sons, but had understood, in a place deeper than language, that the $100 had worked. He opened his eyes on the television. The Congresswoman was sitting with her hands flat on the table. She was not speaking. His son was speaking. His son was talking about tip jars and bartenders and the difference between earning money and spending someone else. Raphael knew about that difference. In Cuba, the people who spent other people's money were called the government. In America, they were called different things. But the principle was the same. You earn it or you take it. There is no third option. The Congresswoman took it. She took $25 from a woman who wipes elderly people's backs for a living and spent it on a hotel in a city Raphael had never heard of. His son was explaining this calmly, with receipts. Raphael smiled. Not a big smile, but the small smile of a man who washed dishes for 50 cents an hour and raised a senator. That's enough. The hearing resumed. The chairman thanked both panelists. The cameras turned off. The staff packed up. The marble room emptied the way it always does, slowly, quietly. The echoes of what was said lingering in the stone like heat in a wall after the sun goes down. AOC's staff gathered her papers. They moved quickly, the haste of people who want to be out of a room before someone asks them another question. AOC stood. She did not shake Cruz's hand. She did not look at the cameras. She walked to the side exit, the same side exit that every witness uses when the main hallway is full of reporters, and disappeared into a corridor where for the first time in 6 years, no one was recording. Cruz remained at the table. He placed the 5 receipts back in the folder. He placed the folder back in the briefcase, the scuffed leather briefcase that his father had bought with money earned washing dishes. The briefcase that had been to the Supreme Court 9 times. The briefcase that had carried more evidence than most lawyers see in a career. He closed the clasp. He stood. He shook the chairman's hand. And he walked out through the main door, past the cameras, past the reporters, and did not stop for questions. He didn't need to. The receipts spoke for themselves. But the receipts were public now. The email was public. The letter was public. And somewhere in the Bronx, a woman named Elena Dominguez was helping an 3-year-old woman out of a shower chair. And somewhere in Houston, a man named Rafael Cruz was sitting in a living room in a house he bought with money he earned washing dishes, and the distance between those two people and the woman who spent their money on hotels was measured not in miles, but in receipts. 5 receipts. 5 questions. No answers. The tip jar was empty, and everyone knew who took the money. In any bar in America, that gets you fired.